Are you wanting to properly record video outdoors? Then you might just need a neutral density filter. Stay tuned to find out why. Now there's a rule called the 180-degree rule, and I won't go into technical details on how this rule was born, but suffice it to say that to get proper motion blur in your videos, you will need to follow this rule. So what is this 180-degree rule? Basically, it states that your shutter speed needs to be set to a value that is double that of your frame rates per second. So if you are recording at 24 frames per second, you would want to set your shutter speed to 1/48th of a second. And if you are recording at 30 frames per second, you would want to set your shutter speed to 1/60th of a second. You see, that is double the value of your frame rates per second. So, pop quiz. If you are recording at 60 frames per second, what would you want to set your shutter speed to? And that's the right answer. I knew you could do it. You would want to set your shutter speed to 1/120th of a second. Now, a quick note. Some cameras do not have the option for 1/48th of a second, so you would want to set it to a value that is the closest to that. In other words, 1/50th of a second. Now, what is so important about this 180-degree rule? Well, like I said earlier, it ensures proper motion blur in your videos. And by that I mean the motion blur that the human eye has been accustomed to seeing in movies and cinema over many decades. Now, where does the neutral density filter come into play with all of this? Well, currently I'm recording this video with a variable neutral density filter on my camera lens. And as you can see, I'm relatively well exposed. I'm also respecting the 180-degree rule. So I'm recording at 24 frames per second with a shutter speed of 1/50th of a second, and I have the ISO set to the lowest it can go on my Canon 80D just because we are recording outdoors, so ISO 100. I also have the lens wide open with an aperture of f3.5 just to allow in a lot of light, but also to give me that shallow depth of field. And as you can see, I'm relatively well exposed. But most importantly, since I'm respecting the 180-degree rule, if there is any motion in my video, it is going to give the proper motion blur. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and take the variable neutral density filter off of my camera lens so we can see the difference that makes. Now before we go ahead and do that, if you have not yet subscribed, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button down below and to give this video a big thumbs up. Ah, now we can see the difference. I'm totally overexposed. I look like a washed out ghost. And that is because I am no longer using a neutral density filter on the front of my lens. So what solution is there here to get a proper exposure? I want to respect the 180-degree rule so that I get proper motion blur in my video. So obviously I can't change the shutter speed. I have to leave that at 1/50th of a second. And I'm already at the lowest ISO I can go on my Canon 80D, ISO 100. So all that's left would be to change the aperture to close the lens down. Let's give that a try. F5, F7, F9, F10. Let's check the exposure, still overexposed, F11. And my camera meter is telling me that I'm properly exposed at F11. So there's a solution, but I've now lost my shallow depth of field. As you can see behind me, everything has probably come into focus, including the tree. So that is not always desired. What solution is there in this case? Well, a neutral density filter. Let's go ahead and bring it back down to f3.5. There we go. And let's go ahead and throw the neutral density filter on the front of the lens. Ah, there we go. Let's check the exposure. I'm a little overexposed, so I'll adjust the variable neutral density filter. And now it says I'm underexposed, so I'll pull it a bit back. And now it's telling me I'm properly exposed. So there we go. This is why it's essential to have a neutral density filter when doing video outdoors, so that you can get proper exposure, shallow depth of field, and respect that 180-degree rule, which ensures proper motion blur should there be any motion in your video. Alright, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up and hit that big red subscribe button down below. And as I always say, keep it real, keep it bling, rock and roll.